in the translation of HIV research into tangible local solutions against HIV. Within the National AIDS Control Council, in addition to the leadership of our CEO, Dr. Ruth Masha, we also have Dr. Vernon Muchache, who's seated at the extreme right, who himself is a researcher and is well known to most of you. He leads our policy and strategy arm, and without research, policy and strategy cannot be implemented. So Dr. Vernon and your team, we thank you even for bringing the researchers on board, including Dr. Ngure, our chairman of the conference, who has done a stellar job. We remain committed to working steadily and progressively with all our stakeholders to address barriers to an effective HIV response, and with programs that put people living with HIV, especially young people and adolescents, at the core and at the center of the work we do. Our chief guest, as you listen to me this morning, allow me now to reflect on the dual global epidemics and their impact on lives of many communities worldwide, and especially on the HIV response in Kenya. Our most vulnerable in society, the elderly, the poor, the immunocompromised, those in informal employment, women and children have to bear the brunt of the disruption of livelihoods, education, food security, economic disproportions, and higher risk of HIV. One of the programs I worked on early in my life was the issues around inheritance rights for women within Luo Nyanza and also in Meru. And I remember our funder then, he said, asking, but what is the link? As Dr. Sangale, who's on my board, will attest, a patient will not adhere to treatment if they're hungry. A patient will not prioritize going for TB treatment if they're sleeping outside with their children. Livelihoods is very important. And food, as we have said from the very beginning, and this has been a rallying call by Nelson and the team, food is a critical issue for people to adhere. And so I want to mention that the livelihoods conversation should not fall off the table. The support of people living with HIV should not fall off the table. Tamu Daniels, you're also listening, you're the head of PEPFAR here in Kenya. I really want you to talk about, and even as you work on your next plan, issues around inclusion of psychosocial support, including the faith-based sector, so that we make sure that by the time the person comes to the doctor, 80% of the cure has already come from knowing that they are not alone. So evidence of continuing spread of COVID in areas of high HIV prevalence raises concerns on its impact on the delivery and uptake of HIV services. Further, we see the adverse impact of social distancing measures on mental health, community cohesion, and support. And I want to note and acknowledge that the impact on mental health has been highest in adolescents and young people, but doctors have also taken a very heavy hit. And so even as we look at our research, let's take care of the person who provides care for us. And for young people, I am okay is not a statement that any parent should take at face value. And so I know that the levels of depression and clinical care has gone up recently, but many people are still not accessing. It is, however, reassuring to note the emerging innovation and resilience of the Kenyan people, despite far-reaching disruptions that has informed the theme of this conference. Innovation has been demonstrated in the development and deployment of differentiated health delivery of health services, such as through mobile, telehealth, and other digital programs, community health volunteers, and cross-programmatic integration. HIV and COVID have taught us that as a world, we are just one global village. You cannot say that I am okay if your neighbor is not okay. Our resilience as a people here in Kenya has been marked by communities' ability to maintain the family and other social ties that hold our society together, leveraging on deeply rooted social capital to ensure that no one was left suffering. We held harambes for food and medical bills, and even as we are sitting here, I don't think there's anyone here in Kenya who's not a member of several WhatsApp groups. I think we have contributed till we realize now we actually have more money than we think we have, right? So there has been a lot of contributions taking care of each other. So we have held harambes for food and medical bills. We have obtained rent concessions, holding one another in the quest to stand together. My bank and others that I know have also held out concessions for people who are not able to pay their loans. And the goal has been that no one actually dies from their suffering and from economic challenges. I am concerned about the informal sector. A lot of people are earning a daily wage, and so when we close our doors, it becomes difficult for them to get food. So can I call you, as Kenyans, we have always taken care of each other. Can we make sure that everybody has food at their table, if nothing else, because that will assist in making sure that everything else is taken care of. Ladies and gentlemen, although Africa has confounded predictions of a COVID apocalypse, complacency is not an option. Lessons we have learned across social systems and public health must be carried forward, as the impact on livelihoods must outlive that on the epidemic. The NAC remains committed to strengthening evidence-based decision-making, knowledge management for strategic information, and strengthening inclusive participation of all stakeholders, both internal and external, in shaping the new normal. I mentioned a global village. So right now I know we have people signed on from across the world. The research will be presented is not only from Kenya. So I want you to recognize, although we'll be honoring the 6 Kenyan researchers, it is because we are seeking for local-based solutions. We want our people to be able to do the research. My goal, even as I look at WHO and UNAIDS and the US government, can we now move towards, aside from ICASA, an Africa Research Conference, so that we can make sure we actually collate and look at the research and the gaps that is coming from Africa. Our chief guest, as I conclude, allow me to remind all researchers, policymakers, scholars, and indeed all you participants present on the need to actualize and implement HIV research findings and resolutions to make them work. Doing so will reinvigorate our efforts in ending the epidemic. As a council and as the leader of this team, we restate our commitment to provide the necessary oversight, strengthen ties with stakeholders and communities, and in ensuring that whatever programs and interventions we are put in place after this conference are actually operationalized. And Dr. Ngugi, I want to hold your feet to the fire, that whatever it is that we come up with here, we actually create a roadmap for implementation. I am not interested in a conference for conference sake. At the age where I am right now, most of us are looking at issues around legacy, and the legacy I would like to leave is a transformed society, not just where we came to talk and we went home. To all participants, I am humbled by your relentless support and participation in the HIV response. It's been 30 plus years. We have not tired. When we were in the Amsterdam conference about 2 years ago, the women that Dorothy and others started with, I think out of almost 36 of them, I think there were only 2 that were still remaining. And so, Dorothy, today I want to acknowledge you and all the other women worldwide who braved the epidemic to be able to speak up, so that young people like our sister here, Cherop, can be able to speak. So, before I call on the CAS, I want to acknowledge my CAS, Mutai Kagwe. Is actually literally our chair, because he's the one who manages all the chairs of the various corporations. So Mutai Kagwe has been supportive. He has really worked on reforms and made sure that we have everything that we need to make it happen. I also want to acknowledge our CS, Yakuri Yatani, who, together with his team, made sure there was an allocation for HIV, malaria, and TB commodities. We are very, very thankful. And my representative, Mr. Patrick Mashari, on the board, kindly convey our gratitude to the PS and on to the CS, because that is important to us. And it is the 2 CSs working together, and obviously the overall leadership by Our Excellency, the President Uhuru Kenyatta, that makes my work, even in the HIV epidemic, so not easy, but doable, and it is also a pleasure to do it. So without further ado, can I now invite our CAS, Dr. Masi Mwagangi, to please address us. Karibu sana, Daktari.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Siparo. I see you want to give me a new name and call me Mrs., so I'll appreciate that. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Hello, are you able to hear me?
We are soon getting her. It's the technology.
Hello? Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, you can boost the sound now.
Oh, fantastic. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. the chair, Angeline Siparo, for making this conference possible and for inviting us here today. Thank you also to the session chair, Mr. Kenneth Gure, who's done a fantastic job of highlighting all the objectives that we intended to meet in today's session. And at the end of this conference, all the things that we want to have learned and how we intend to apply those lessons. Thank you to Ruth Libon Masha, who continues to do exceptional work as the CEO of NAC, as well as all the other key stakeholders who work with us when it comes to HIV management and control, recognizing the role that WHO plays. Dr. Rudy Eggers, thank you so much for your presence here, as well as those who will be joining us virtually, the ED, Gwini Banyima, the ED from UNAIDS, Dr. Tamu Daniel from PEPFAR, recognizing the good work that Dr. Catherine Gugia has done from the Ministry of Health, NASCO, as well as county governments who are present here, appreciating the presence of the chair of the Health Committee of COG, Prof. Anyanyong. And thank you to everyone else who I may not have mentioned your presence here today. And so, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I welcome you all to Maisha HIV/AIDS Conference 2021. Let me start by saying that we have indeed made strides in living in our new normal. I'm aware we have participants drawn from far and wide following this conference virtually, a true affirmation of the innovation and resilience we'll be speaking of today. And I must particularly commend the choice of this year's event theme, towards the last mile, resilience and innovation. And listening to the conference chair as well as the chair of NAC, I can see how indeed this is the time for us, particularly as a country, as we work towards the control of HIV, to really adopt all the innovative mechanisms that we've been able to learn through, and particularly from our researchers who have been able to present to us new thoughts, new ideas, new knowledge that then requires to be translated into action. And then, of course, when we speak of resilience, I think Kenya has done exceptionally well, particularly recognizing that we are now going through a pandemic. And indeed, I can tell you teams within the Ministry of Health and NAC have really put in great effort in ensuring that there's a continuity of service when it comes to HIV care. And this is amidst great constraints, both financial constraints, political economic constraints. However, the team has been able to put in place a lot of work to ensure that these services are available. We are just a few years shy of meeting our commitment to end AIDS by 2030, and therefore we need to accelerate our progress in this last stretch. I'm however happy to note we've made significant strides in this regard. By 2020, Kenya had reduced annual AIDS-related deaths from a high of 166,000 in 2007 to about 20,897 in 2020. New annual HIV infections have been reduced from over 140,000 in 2008 to 41,000 thereabouts in 2020. And HIV prevalence rates have come down from 14% in the mid-90s to 4.5% in 2020. And this indeed is remarkable progress in the fight against HIV. However, despite these gains, Kenya is one of the African countries with the highest level of HIV, and more needs to be done to prevent new infections, to enhance testing, and to have persons living with HIV enrolled for lifelong, life-saving ART treatment. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to have participated and represented our CES, Mutai Kagwe, in presenting the country position at the just completed UN General Assembly high-level meeting. And as a country, we committed to promote multisectoral leadership and accountability to end intersecting inequalities that obstruct progress in HIV response. And Kenya was very loud and firm when it talked about the need to ensure that there's universal access to comprehensive, quality, integrated combination prevention, HIV and STI treatment, and to accelerate efforts towards ensuring that there's also the triple elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV, EMTCT, Hep B, and syphilis. And in this high-level meeting, we were able to talk about the need to protect the rights of people to live a life free of gender-based violence, as well as HIV-related stigma and discrimination. And Madam Siparo has mentioned this today in her opening remarks, that we've made gains, and we need to focus our gains particularly on the cohort who are born with HIV and are now in their 30s, are living with it, and to ensure that we continue fighting against HIV-related stigma. These are in addition to the local and regional global commitments that we've made in terms of HIV response, which we remain committed to. And therefore today, our convening today is very timely because it enables us to focus on our common purpose and to pull together towards attaining these goals. We do continue to provide leadership for the response at both national and county level. I'm aware county governments continue to receive technical assistance that's required to establish the relevant structures that are required and also make needed investments in the provision of HIV and AIDS and other health services. And from these efforts, all counties have developed their individual county AIDS implementation plans, which will be launched as part of this conference. And I really do commend all the 47 counties who've been able to put these plans together and who continue to implement robust HIV programs that will inch us closer towards ending HIV and AIDS. It is not lost on me the challenges that we face in funding the HIV response, particularly this year where we've had to make a lot of investments towards the COVID response. And of course, this has led sometimes to disinvestments in different disease groups. And so one of the key things that I've seen is a theme in this conference is HIV financing. And I'll be looking forward to that session, particularly to see what new information, what new knowledge, what new innovative mechanisms can we put in place when it comes to HIV financing. Despite the benefits of Kenya being rebased as a lower middle income country, new challenges emerge due to the need to fill the emerging gap in resourcing essential commodities. Kenya, however, has committed to implement long-term financing models to make concessions for local production of HIV commodities to ensure sustainability of the HIV response. And at this point, let me pause and say, and particularly to the researchers who are present, in this conference today, the young ones and the old ones, the very experienced ones. And I'm glad as I look at the program, I'm seeing names that I'm familiar with, from Dr. Maritim to different other members. It would be interesting to see what the researchers and the academicians are able to tell us when it comes to local production of HIV commodities in Kenya. While scaling and ensuring that these commodities perhaps reach not just Kenya, but the East African community. How does government support local pharmaceutical industries to ensure that they can actually go through with the local production of these commodities? So this is some of the new emerging areas of research that we will be looking forward to.
We have lost you once again, Madam Cass.
Can you
hear me? If you are getting us, we have lost you from your end.
Hello, can you hear me? Am I back on? Hello, am I hear me now? Okay, great. I see someone saying that they can hear me. Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Boost your volume.
One of the key things, okay, great. What I was saying is that we need to ensure that the researchers who are present here today also provide us with new knowledge on what we need to do when it comes to really supporting local manufacturing industries and ensuring that the HIV commodities are available here. We do take note of the challenge that COVID-19 has presented, unprecedented challenges when it comes to healthcare. We've witnessed a lot of upheaval in all sections, particularly when we look at the economy, political sections, public health, a lot of upheaval all across. And we do appreciate, and I mentioned this in the beginning, all the efforts that have been made to ensure that the HIV response is not disrupted and that we're able to ensure that there's continuum of care and control of efforts. And so we thank you for all the support that you've given us. I can see different stakeholders here who have really championed in ensuring that essential services are available. Now, allow me to go back to the conference theme, the resilience and innovation of the Kenyan government and her people. On resilience, Kenyans have been consistent in holding drives to support one another. COVID-19 is no exception. We've seen community-led initiatives offering support and rescue to their community members. The faith sector, civil society has stepped up their efforts in information sharing and in maintaining the social fabric of our community society, despite the great loss to many. And I do appreciate today that we were able to have a moment of silence for those that we've lost during the COVID pandemic, healthcare workers who we've lost, but also citizens who we've lost, and particularly also those who suffer, who've been living with HIV, who have been lost through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we really do thank the health workers who are still there, who continue to present themselves and who continue to fight this pandemic. We thank them for their resilience and we commend them for it. On innovation, I'm happy to highlight emerging scientific breakthroughs such as the COVID-19 vaccine and the implications of this on the HIV vaccine, especially the lessons learned and the challenges of implementation. We have witnessed a rising number of Kenyans receiving their second dose, and this is encouraging. And while we acknowledge the challenges faced, including in maintaining cold chains, securing PPEs, and vaccine hesitancy, the lessons that we're learning right now will definitely be useful when it comes to the eventual rollout of the HIV vaccine. And further, of course, we've seen the use of digital platforms, including when it comes to management of supply chains and service delivery through different mechanisms, mHealth mechanisms, telehealth mechanisms. And we would like to see that this approach integrated into HIV programmatic care to ensure that we actually leverage on all the lessons that we learned this COVID-19 pandemic. The use of data cannot be understated, particularly as we are here today. I think today is all about data, today is all about evidence. And I like that we actually have a session that says numbers do not lie. And that is really why we are all here today. And so today I'm hoping that we'll be able to use all our results for policy formulation and analysis. I'm particularly interested in the session that talks about translating knowledge into policy and really facilitating that cycle of knowledge translation, implementation, research. And we therefore look forward to optimizing these in realization of our health targets. As I conclude, allow me to really commend NAC for organizing this conference, particularly during very challenging times. I do thank the members from MOH who've also played parts, particularly NASCOP teams. I see the NCD teams here. I see the malaria teams, who are all coming together to share different pieces of work and evidence. I thank them for their efforts and their contributions to this conference. I am confident that we shall indeed re-energize the HIV response to respond to emerging challenges, to respond to emerging infections in the scope of COVID-19, and I believe we will promote through recognition and dissemination of the efforts of our local experts to ensure that we really do produce local data and that this data is utilized. I'm especially looking forward to joining you on Wednesday while we shall be awarding our local experts, particularly looking forward to presenting the gift to the young researchers, the young emerging scientists, and to really commend their efforts and to encourage those efforts, because without you, we shall not be able to move forward as a country, particularly as we plan for the future, as we plan to ensure that we're controlling and managing the HIV response as well as other disease areas. I would like also to thank the leadership at the ministry. Waziri Mutahi Kagwe sends his greetings to the members of this conference. He was unable to join us today, but as Madam Siparo has said, he really supports, particularly HIV, malaria, and TB, recognizing the strategic impetus that these programs have when it comes to reducing the overall mortality in the country. And I can tell you behind the scenes, there's a lot of reform interventions that we are looking at, particularly when it comes to integrating, some of the resources that we have, reforms that touch on local manufacturing, reforms that actually also touch on self-reliance. We want to see a Kenya where, in a few years' time, we are self-reliant when it comes to the availability of these commodities and medicines. And so a lot of work is underway through the support of CS Mutahi Kagwe and all the other technical leadership teams within the Ministry of Health to ensure that really we do pay the needed attention to managing and controlling HIV and AIDS. Thank you so much again, and it is now my pleasure, and I do apologize for the technical hitches, but it is now my pleasure to declare this conference officially opened. Thank you.
Can we give another hearty clap to Madam Kass? Thank you, Daktari. Thank you, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, for that wonderful speech. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the conference is officially open, and now I take you back to the program. She's a representative from Sauti Skika, an organization for and by adolescents and young people both living with HIV and those affected by the epidemic. The goal is to ensure that the voice of adolescents and young people living with HIV is heard at all levels of HIV response. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Ruth Limo from Sauti Skika as she comes to make her remarks.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Distinguished guests, honorable audience, and everyone else who's joining us virtually, thank you for the opportunity. On behalf of young people, today my name is not Jerop. My name is Young People. I am their voice, and I'm standing here just to ensure that their needs are well amplified. We know that Kenya strives to remain on the right path towards ending AIDS as a public health threat by the year 2030, just as echoed by Mrs. Mwangangi. This will not be realized by the government alone, but we must also bring in partners, including people living with HIV in their diversities, from young people to key population, to women, men, and children. We also know that the burden of HIV has been shifting to adolescents and young people, and especially adolescents and young women. In 2019, 61% of the new HIV infections in Kenya were among young people between the ages 15 to 29 years. Many young people are unable to access sexual reproductive health and services that leave them at elevated risk of HIV and even other STIs, including unintended pregnancies. The situation has been literally made worse by the pandemic. We must also remember that related stigma and discrimination is high amongst people living with HIV in their diversities. At least this is what we have learned from the recently concluded Stigma Index conducted by the Network of People Living with HIV, in which young people were key participants, including the research coordinators and the research assistants. This only shows that as young people, we are very, very capable of taking lead in these spaces. We are very, very capable of being amplified voices for our own. The government must play a role in making sure HIV testing, prevention services, and treatment commodities are available for those who need it. We are talking about not just services, but quality, affordable services specifically tailored to fit the needs of young people and people living with HIV in their diversities. Amidst of COVID, mental health has become an urgent need for young people, both living with and affected by HIV. The struggles of COVID-19 have clearly highlighted the urgent need of mental health wellness support for our communities. We are talking about access to affordable mental health services in both national facilities to our community-based health centers being an urgent need. Our request today, on behalf of our young people, is for key stakeholders in the HIV response field to provide seats for young people to sit in your spaces, for partners to give young people the opportunity to design, implement, and even evaluate their programs. As young people, I believe that we are capable. I mean, that's why I'm here today, right? That's why I'm here. I am here on behalf of my fellow young people who are fully skilled enough to take charge in their programs. A conversation today in the morning with Dr. Catherine from NAC, and everyone else wants to know how do we bridge in the gap? How do we solve the needs of young people? How do we reduce the high prevalence rate of HIV infections among young people? And I'll honestly tell you today, the only way we solve all this is by giving young people a seat at your tables. We might not necessarily be, having the correct degrees for them, but by the fact that we have first-hand experience in these problems, I believe we have the first-hand experience in giving solutions to them. As young people, we are a voice. We are a voice that wants to ensure by the year 2030, we no longer have new infections among young people. Not necessarily among young people, but even among the general population. We have our young ones. Times have changed. We in a digital era. Conference is hybrid. So we as young people, fully equipped with skills and knowledge and experience, we request for a seat at your tables. We don't want to be involved for rubber stamping. We don't want to be involved for reporting, but we want to be involved for impact. As I conclude on behalf of young people, give us the opportunity to be the key drivers of aspects, programs, and issues affecting us. And in this context, research and innovation. We are capable. Provide the opportunities for us to learn and unlearn in order to be leaders of tomorrow. Nothing for us young people without us young people. Thank you.
Nothing for us young people without young people. Thank you very much, Ruth Limo. And at this moment, I hope now we are ready on the other side. I would like to take you back as I invite the opening remarks from the Director of National AIDS Control Council, Dr. Ruth Masha, who is coming to us virtually. Thank you, and nakaribu.
Our guests, those who are physically present and those who are virtual, I wish to take this opportunity to welcome today to participate in the 6th Maisha HIV and AIDS Conference for the year 2021. Allow me to take this opportunity to acknowledge our chief guests, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, our Chair, National AIDS Control Council, Ms. Angelina Siparo, the Chair of the Council of Governors, the Health Committee, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, the Chair of the Maisha Conference, Professor Kenneth Ngure, our bilateral and multilateral partners today represented by Ines Chuma, the Regional Director of UNAIDS, who is representing the UNAIDS Executive Director, Winnie Byanyima, Dr. Rudy Edgar, representing the World Health Organization Director General, Dr. Tamu Daniels, the Country Director Chief Lyons, President and Executive Officer of the Elizabeth Pediatric Foundation, who is also our guest today, Dr. Catherine Bugi, the head of NASCO, Ruth Limo, representing adolescent and young people, and Southeast Kika movement, communities of people living with HIV, communities of people affected by HIV, the communities of research, and all scientists who have been working this journey with us in Kenya. Good morning. 37 years since we had our first HIV case officially documented in Kenya, we have gone a long way. Indeed, we have seen what a committed people and resilient response can be able to achieve. As we begin this conference, we begin with a reflection of how science and translation of science has been able to provide some wins and gains within a response that has been so much needed. Today, we celebrate the ability to keep more people on a life-saving medication. We also celebrate the fact that we've been able to reduce the number of AIDS-related deaths, although still high and regrettable. We know that progress has been made. We also would like to take this opportunity as we look at the historical perspective of our response and appreciate the partners, the US government that came into this country in 2004 and allowed us to have one of the largest programs of life-saving for people living with HIV by providing access to antiretroviral. We also do acknowledge the Global Fund that also has significantly contributed to the gains that we have today. So today, as we do reflect on the value of research in the journey of the HIV response, we know that we are on a path towards ending AIDS as a public health threat by the year 2030. And indeed, this path can be or can take us where we want to go. While we have seen progress in this last mile, we must accelerate progress. We have innovations, we have science, and we know what works. Research has evolved over the years. We now have more efficacious medications. We also have multiple choices for prevention. And all that remains is to put that science into action. So while we continue calling for research into a cure for HIV, or research that will provide a vaccine that ensures that HIV is no longer a public health threat, we have multiple choices that we can use today to stem the number of new HIV infections, but also to ensure that those people who are infected are living a dignified life. So moving forward, the priority for Kenya includes, in addition to research, the ability to use implementation science to translate and swiftly ensure that science and the products that are coming are accessible to the population and the citizen. We do admit that we've done a lot, but there's much more that is needed that we can do. We also are aware of the contributions of the research field in HIV that has also brought into light other public health concerns. HIV and related comorbidities. We have seen that in the course of the research within HIV, we've been able to look at issues such as mental health issues, issues of comorbidities such as tuberculosis, issues of cancers that are either related to HIV or cancers, just cancers on their own. And indeed, we know that the platforms that you've created for research in HIV can be used to provide solutions for many other challenges that we are facing as a country. As a National AIDS Control Council, we take this opportunity to call for funding of research. Indeed, we feel that if we aggressively continue to fund our own Kenyan-led research, we can be able to provide localized solutions and choices suited for the people within their context. We know the heterogeneity of the HIV epidemic. We also know the heterogeneity of our geographical context, and therefore we are calling for more money to research, because that's the only way we'll be able to provide people with solutions that suit their lives. Allow me to take this opportunity to applaud all the Kenyan scientists that have been working with us for the last 37 years. We'd like, on behalf of all Kenyans, to appreciate the work that you do, because indeed, you have been sitting behind the scenes, sometimes without names, sometimes with names, but your efforts in the contribution of the HIV response have been fruitful and are well appreciated. Let me take this other opportunity to also appreciate all people who have participated in the HIV research within Kenya. We've had people participating within the research for vaccines. We have people in Kenya volunteering to participate in various researches, including for the new products. Indeed, globally, most of the groundbreaking researches in HIV, Kenya has played a big role. And to that, we thank you and thank our volunteers for that act of humanity that they have provided the world. Let me take this opportunity to also acknowledge the people living with HIV. The first person publicly declaring their HIV positive status, Dr. Joe Muriuki. Today, he's still with us. But most importantly, the breaking the silence for those who departed, we also owe to them, because without them, then science would not have advanced. They confronted stigma. They allowed us to see HIV in a different perspective than we ever would think that would have seen it. They humanized HIV when it had been dehumanized. Today, many people have benefited because of the courageous efforts these people have done in the past. Today, we continue to see the movement grow, and we look forward to working with all people living with HIV to ensure that we can stop new infections from happening, but most importantly also ensure that we eliminate stigma and discrimination, and ensure that people living with HIV, wherever they are in this country, they are living a dignified life. As we come into the last mile, we have been tested with another pandemic, one that has been so vicious in many other parts of the world. Again, we see the role the HIV structures, systems, trainings that we've done in the past, including our community volunteers, have done to complement the work that we have done on the fight against COVID-19. As we continue on this journey, we will not want to drop the ball of the HIV epidemic, especially in the country. Because we know when two pandemics or epidemics interact, and one of them is dropped off the ball, the consequences can be devastating. And as such, as we get into the last mile, despite the challenges we are facing with COVID-19, we need to strive to continue not just with research, but ensuring that we become more effective and providing the resources that we have to make sure that we are also addressing other diseases. So with that, allow me to say that at the National AIDS Control Council, as we start this conference, we would like to welcome all of you, and we look forward towards the outcome that you can all be able to implement the actions that have been provided by our stakeholder so that we can achieve that really last mile we so desire. Thank you very much.
Chief guests, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe, Minister.
Asante, thank you for that. Thank you, the Director of National AIDS. At this moment, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Dr. Catherine Ngugi. Dr. Catherine Ngugi is the head of NASCOP that leads Kenyan health sector response to HIV and AIDS, sexually transmitted infection, that is STIs, and viral hepatitis through policy and guidelines formulation. I would like to give her this platform so that she can come and tell us more on her line. Welcome, Dr. Catherine Ngugi.
Our chief guest, Chief Administrative Secretary, Minister of Health, Dr. Mase Mwangangi, our chair, Madam Marjorie Siparo, Chair of Health Committee of the Council of Governors, joining us virtually, Professor Nyang Nyongo, Country Director, PEPFAR, Dr. Tamu Daniels,
Executive Director, UNAIDS, Dr. Winnie, and President and CEO of ECPAF, Chief Lyons, Dr. Medin, UNAIDS representatives, WHO Representative Kenya, Dr. Rudy Eggers, Dr. Masha, Ruth CEO NAC, Board of the National AIDS Control Council, government officials, county representatives, all people living with HIV, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Good morning. Good morning again. That was better. It's my great pleasure to be here today to participate in the 6th Maisha HIV and AIDS Conference 2021. I appreciate the National AIDS Control Council under the leadership of our chair and the CEO, Dr. Masha, for creating this platform that allows us to share strides made in HIV and AIDS epidemic control in Kenya, as well as deliberate on challenges that continue to hamper our goal, attaining 0 new HIV infections. This year's theme, Towards the Last Mile, Resilience and Innovation, is timely, reminding us of the resilience in each one of us to fight against HIV and AIDS, and now fighting a second pandemic, COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, today marks a great day in our calendar, demonstrating the collaboration and partnerships among various governments, multilateral and bilateral, civil society organizations, and partners with regard to the HIV and AIDS response in our country. The 3-day program brings together top-notch scientists, innovators, activists, programmers, and other stakeholders to share knowledge and evidence during these unprecedented times. But we hope we will not only serve a solutions-oriented platform, but remind us of the numerous scientific breakthroughs and address the critical issues surrounding our collective response. Thanks, Chair, for reminding us that it's not only about finishing the 3-day meeting, but ensuring that the discussions we'll have here, that we'll go and implement them, but not just state them in paper. Let me take a moment and reflect on the fruits of the journey of the 40 years of resilience in the fight against HIV and AIDS. And I'll reiterate what our CAS, Dr. Mwangagi, has stated. We know we are number 4 in the sub-Saharan Africa and even Africa with the highest number of people living HIV in the world. But we have made great strides. And I think when you saw the chart Dr. Masha was showing out, for the last 37 years, we have really made great strides. But we still know that when we compare our adolescents and young persons, the new HIV infections affects more, almost to 62%, 15 to 24 years. And Ruth, we hear you out, Remo, and I really call out on all partners to ensure that at the table we have a seat dedicated for the adolescents and young persons. Because I can tell you, for the time I've been the head of NASCO, when we have tried implementing the many strategies and interventions that we have had for the years, it's not working for that group. We have to go back to the drawing table. And I really call upon each one of us to have a seat for adolescents and young people on the table. We continue to press on. Out of the 1.5 million, we have 1.2 who are on treatment. But definitely we are missing 300,000. And I really feel more so for children who are less than 14 years old, who don't have the voice, that we have to be the voice for them. The children, adolescents, and adults have the past 3 years been put on optimized regimens to ensure faster virus suppression achievement. We appreciate the multilateral and bilateral support, not only in the commitment in HIV response, but continued support over the years. As a ministry, we greatly appreciate the contribution of each of your efforts towards these tremendous achievements, as well as support from our development and donor partners. Even though we have geographical unique gaps and population gaps, if we work together, we can achieve more and let our generation and future generations live fulfilling life without being limited by the HIV. The current global COVID-19 pandemics have greatly challenged the positive gains made towards achieving HIV epidemic control. Prevention services have really been greatly affected due to the reduction in community outreaches, specifically on voluntary medical male circumcision, key population outreaches as well. Community HIV testing services have also been greatly affected. In fact, it reduced with more than 72%. Access to health facilities was greatly reduced. During the initial phase we had because of delayed HIV diagnosis and potential increase in HIV transmission within the community, especially mother-to-child transmission of HIV. There has been an increase in vulnerability with marginalized populations becoming more marginalized, and an increase in gender-based violence, particularly among women and children. Investments made to support HIV implementation have been leveraged to support response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Great innovations and strong evidence of resilient communities such as which will be showcased in the 3 days conference have also emerged, with people living with HIV supporting community distribution of antiretroviral therapy and rapid scale-up or multi-month dispensing to maintain continuity of treatment. Ladies and gentlemen, we are tackling a double and sometimes a triple pandemic, which is not easy. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, none of the HIV services was greatly affected. The HIV testing service continued within our facilities, but declined at the community level, as I said before. But our clients were able to access treatment. We would have like one of the people living with HIV going to pick drugs for other colleagues and be able to go distribute it to other counties. Our country remains committed to the joint United Nations program on UNAIDS, that's the 2595 targets for ending the AIDS epidemic by 2030. But no, we are currently tracking our 1990 goals, where 90% of people living with HIV are identified, 90% are put on treatment, and out of the 90% put on treatment, they ensure that they have attained virus suppression. So far, overall, in terms of uptake for the whole population, we have been able to identify 79.4% of all people living with HIV. And out of the 96% of the ones we have identified have been put on treatment. And out of the 96% have been put on treatment, 88.4% have achieved virus suppression. As at the end of 2020, in terms of uptake, we were at 80% being identified, 90% on treatment, and 94% of the ones on treatment. Our gap remains among the pediatric population, where only 79% have been identified, 93% have been put on treatment, and only 67% are virus suppressed. But we also remember that apart from the 1990, we have other challenges. First, and as I was saying, triple pandemic, teenage pregnancies. Colleagues, I think that's an area where we are as a country, we need to look at HIV and other issues holistically and comprehensively. We have noted with increased teenage pregnancies, as well as we note increased new HIV infections, and as well you have noted increased mother-child transmission of HIV. As well, psychosocial support. I think we addressed it at the beginning, and we came a point we lacked on it, and I think it's time we go back and have psychosocial support admitted and be able to support our people on it. I really want to applaud the many researchers, especially from Cambridge institutions, teasing out Professor Mbukusi and Neri Mugo, who for the last 1 year have brought to our attention the increased other sexually transmitted infections, especially chlamydia and gonorrhea, among our young girls who are between 15 to 25 years old. We have noted 29% increase of chlamydia and gonorrhea. And let me tell you, yes, you have treatment for it, but more so I'm worried of infertility. So in the coming years, we will have other pandemics caused because of other sexually transmitted infections that I think we have neglected. As a country and as a government, we are committed to the elimination of mother-child transmission of HIV on new infections. We know right now we are at 10.9%, and we hope by 2024 we'll be less than 5%. We are working collaboratively with other stakeholders in ensuring that all women infected during pregnancy and breastfeeding are rapidly diagnosed and put on treatment, and they continue with their treatment, their pregnancy, breastfeeding, and beyond all. All exposed infants are put on prophylaxis. Over the years, we have evidence that when HIV-infected infants are identified early and started on lifelong antiretroviral therapy, they live and thrive to their full potential without being limited to their HIV status. We boast as a country our great success, which is attributable to many factors, one of being the excellent partnership we have with our county governments, collaboration with bilateral and multilateral agencies, a multi-sectoral response with a strong health sector leadership, and strong political commitment from our leadership. And as I finalize on my final remarks, is I really want to appreciate the chair of the board, the Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe, the Principal Secretary Madam Susan Muchache, CEO NAC, Parliament, Treasury, and His Excellency for increasing the government allocation. We have been, because of the three diseases, not only 5.8 billion. So in the year 2021-2022, the government has allocated 9.7 billion to HIV, TB, and malaria, which is a very, very big achievement. But still, with the key gaps remain, we strive to offer the best quality of services to the PL-HIV in our country in the space of reduction of the funding, and I'm really grateful to the government for the allocation. As we battle these pandemics, among others, I urge all of us to remain committed to providing equitable, affordable, quality health care of the highest standards to our fellow citizens. I hope that during these days of consultation with all of you, our conversation shall help us to identify opportunities to design and support tailor-made interventions for improving HIV and other sexually transmitted infection services in Kenya, because the buck stops with us. With these remarks, all people living with HIV must survive to thrive. I wish you all the best, and thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. At this moment, I would like to introduce Dr. Rudy Eggers. Dr. Eggers was engaged as the National Immunization Program Manager in the National Department of Health of South Africa and headed major programs changes during this time, including the change of the vaccination schedule, the introduction of Hep B and Hib vaccines into the program, and the implementation of polio and measles campaign. He then served as a team leader for the WHO immunization intercountry program in Eastern Africa in Nairobi, Kenya, supporting immunization programs in 8 East African countries before he joined the WHO headquarters in Geneva. As a team leader of the immunization services, strengthening in the Directorate for Immunization, Vaccines, and Biologicals in the year 2005. In WHO, his current work is focused on providing guidance to improve immunization and coverage and to strengthen immunization systems, especially lower performing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, let us put our hands together for Dr. Rudy Eggers.
Thank you very much, and let me start off by recognizing some of the distinguished guests. Of course, our chief guest, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, the CAS of Health, but also Madam Angeline Shiparo, the chair of the board of NAC, Professor Anyang Nyong'o, the governor of Kisumu, who chairs the health committee, Professor Kenneth Ngure, chairing this meeting, of course, Dr. Mark Maxwell, the representative of the UN government, US government. Then from the UN agencies, Dr. Winnie Mbyayima, the executive director of UN AIDS, also represented here by Dr. Medin Chehai, who is resident here in Kenya. Dr. Ruth Laibon Masha, the CEO of NAC, who we heard on the online. And let me just also welcome Ms. Ruth Nemo. I think it's absolutely astounding, the passion that she brings to this conversation. So thank you so much. Distinguished guests here in the room, in Kenya, online, across the world, good morning. Habari Yasibui. Today I'm actually standing in for the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who was invited to this very important meeting but was not able to come. So on behalf, I'm very happy to speak to you today. Let me present to you the remarks from WHO. This is a very important meeting at a decisive time for for HIV/AIDS in Kenya and for the response of the global HIV epidemic. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused severe disruptions among many essential services, including the disruptions to the HIV control. This threatens to unravel some of those gains that we've made in the past years, and it threatens to derail the Sustainability Development Goals. Against this background, the Global AIDS Strategy 2021 to 2026 was adopted last week in the UN General Assembly high-level meeting on HIV/AIDS. This is very important because this high-level meeting comes at a historic time of the AIDS response, namely 40 years after the emergence of that first HIV case. The countries at the high-level meeting on HIV and AIDS adopted a political declaration in order to get the world back onto track as AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. Recommitting to urgent action over the next 5 years, the member states agreed to the following. Firstly, to reduce the annual HIV infections to under 370,000 and annual AIDS-related deaths to under 250,000 by 2025, ending pediatric AIDS and eliminating all forms of HIV stigma and discrimination. Secondly, to achieve the 95-95-95 testing, treatment and viral suppression targets within all demographics and groups and geographic settings, including children and adolescents living with HIV. Thirdly, ensuring that by 2025 at least 34 million people living with HIV access to medicines, treatments and diagnostics. Fourthly, to ensure that 95% of people at risk of HIV infection are protected against pandemics. Fifthly, to eliminate all forms of sexual and gender-based violence, including intimate partner violence, by adopting and enforcing laws that address multiple forms of discrimination and violence faced by women living with, at risk of, and affected by HIV. And then finally, to ensure that 90% of people living with HIV receive preventative treatment for TB and reduce AIDS-related TB deaths by 80% by 2025. You can see these are very ambitious targets, again, getting the full political will. Over the last 2 years, the number of new HIV infections globally have only slowly reduced to 1.5 million annually, and there was a stabilization of AIDS-related deaths at 690,000. And while millions of people now have access to ARVs, global targets for prevention, testing and treatment are off target. WHO is concerned that the progress is stalling because HIV protection, prevention and testing services are not reaching the groups that need them the most. Addressing these challenges will require a people-centered approach with comprehensive and integrated health services that address all the needs of the whole person. That is why WHO's top priority is supporting universal health coverage worldwide and especially here in Kenya. We are encouraged that it is based on strong primary health care with an emphasis on promoting health and preventing disease. Working together in solidarity, we can get back on track in ending the AIDS epidemic and build a healthier, safer world for all of us. As stated, the world needs to intensify efforts to end AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. This is especially true given the disruptions of the current pandemic. We have the tools and guidelines, and now we have a new strategy that will set the tone towards elimination of these new infections and reducing the burden of AIDS. The Global AIDS Strategy and its 2025 targets will help align the work and strategies of all, the implementers, the co-sponsors, and the partners. The strategy provides an important multi-sectoral framework to accelerate the progress towards our 2030 targets. We welcome the strategy's focus on intersecting inequalities to address the remaining challenges ending AIDS. The strategy describes interventions that require urgent prioritizations in the coming 5 years and the communities where efforts should be targeted, including key populations, women and girls, and the millions of people living with HIV who are still unaware of their HIV status. It outlines the importance of ensuring that HIV prevention efforts reach all people from key population groups, including men who have sex with men, transgender people, people who inject drugs, and sex workers and their clients, all of whom are higher risk of exposure to HIV than other groups. And it highlights the needs of focus on other priority populations, including adolescent girls and young women in sub-Saharan Africa, and children and adolescents who lack the opportunities to access dedicated services they need. The strategy inspires an ambitious vision for ending gender inequality and realizing human rights, including the right to health, calling upon all partners and stakeholders in the HIV response in every country to transform unequal gender norms and end stigma and discrimination. And as was highlighted before, it calls for better data, for identifying the gaps that we are facing, and stronger links between community-led responses and primary health care that is needed to address these. We would also like to express our appreciation to all the people, the many people who have championed the cause for decades, including people living with HIV and also members of the program coordinating board of the NGO delegation. In addition, WHO is also developing a new global strategy for HIV, hepatitis B, and STIs. As was mentioned a minute ago, STIs are a very important component in this. And this strategy will outline the path to reach the 2030 SDG goals with the strategies. As the pandemic has disrupted delivery of vital services, it is setting back the global effort of many health programs, including those to end HIV and AIDS. The health and community workers who provide the bulk of the HIV services now find themselves battling not only HIV, but COVID. A record 27.4 million people are now on life-saving antiretroviral treatment. While this is good progress, it leaves 10 million people who are living with HIV but are not receiving treatment, and people who have not been diagnosed. This includes health and community workers who are themselves living with HIV. Nevertheless, thank you to the untiring work of the health and community workers. The number of countries reporting disruptions in AIDS and in HIV services has declined by almost 75% since June 2021. Only 9 of the 152 countries surveyed are still reporting ARV disruptions. The number of countries reporting a critically low stock of ARVs has been reduced by half since June, but 12 countries still need urgent resupply of these life-saving medicines. We've seen many new approaches that countries are adopting to ensure HIV care during the pandemic. For example, providing multi-month prescriptions of HIV medicines, which Kenya has previously adapted and implemented. We are seeing other mitigation services in response to the disruptions, including the scale-up of HIV self-test kits to aid the disruption to HIV testing. This strategy is also being used in Kenya. Ultimately, our fight is not against a single disease, but our fight is also against the extreme inequality in health, both in health services, in health access, and in health quality of services. Our fight is against the inequity in which people get sick and die simply because they are poor, or female, or young, or gay, or transgender, or are sex workers, or use drugs, or are in prison. In WHO, we are committed to fight against health inequality in all its forms and are committed to health for all. With those few words, let me thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of WHO in this important meeting. I really wish you a productive discussion. Thank you. Asanteni.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. The Chief Executive Officer, Charles Lyons, has led the foundation through significant changes to the programmatic and advocacy portfolio of work. This organization transition centrally manage globally awards and managing the broad range of bilateral awards in a dozen countries. Ladies and gentlemen, I now introduce Chief Lyons, who is coming to us virtually to make his remarks.
For Health, Ms. Angeline Siparo, National AIDS Control Council Chairperson, Professor Anya Nyango, County Governor and Chair of the Health Committee of the Council of Governors, fellow panelists, invited guests. I'm honored by your invitation to be with you this morning and pleased to share some remarks on ending HIV among children and adolescents at this important conference. In fact, we are encouraged and confident that together we can secure an AIDS-free generation for Kenyans and for people around the world. We have the tools to do so, but to really achieve our aim, we need real leadership and dedicated resources that prioritize children. Based on recent national data from Kenya, we see that in 2019, 6,800 children were newly infected with HIV, representing 16.4% of all new infections in the country. More concerning is that 61% of new HIV infections were among adolescents and young adults between 15 and 29 years. It was not unique to Kenya. Globally, recent data indicates that a staggering 150,000 children were newly infected in 2019, meaning the world has significantly missed targets set for preventing new pediatric HIV infections to fewer than 20,000. Pediatric HIV infections are on the rise in a handful of countries. Pediatric treatment coverage has stalled, and countries and partners have failed to identify and reach almost half of the children living with HIV. We at EGPAF, and I know each of the organizations represented at this conference today, are committed to the goal of ending AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. But it is clear that we are sorely off track. Only be met if we work with serious purpose and innovation to get the greatly improved prevention tools, medicines, and knowledge to those that need them most, while doing so in the context of protecting rights and ending stigma. Approach must extend to children who are never quite viewed in the same light as adults living with HIV. Without a voice in the response, children themselves. And so it falls to all of us to put children forward, then from once again being left behind. In important ways, you did so just last week at the National Multi-Sectoral Consultation convened by UNAIDS, NAC, and faith-based organizations. has the opportunity to hold across the continent, where 90% of children living with HIV reside. Yet one can almost get a sense of complacency on the pediatric HIV agenda, one that we must resist. For example, we must address with urgency that there has been a plateauing in the reduction of mother-to-child transmission in Kenya since 2015. Including the impact HIV has had on Kenya and on the people of Africa, makes ending AIDS in children and youth almost by definition a Kenyan challenge and an African challenge. Leadership, your example of progress, and broadly requires African-led solutions with international support. It's on Kenya to continue leading the way in adapting tools, new technologies, and drug formulations and research to ensure children and youth are not left behind, even in the face of COVID-19. Under the leadership of the esteemed individuals and organizations gathered here today, we can drive action on rapid development and rollout of pediatric diagnostics and treatment of HIV. This includes use of early infant diagnosis. This is an innovation we know works, and we need to bring it to scale. It is crucial to immediately initiate infants born more likely to become gravely ill and die within the first 8 to 12 weeks of life. We need to speed up the adoption of cutting-edge pediatric diagnostic tools and affordable funding. And we really need to engage and support communities to support children outside of the facilities. Our experience has shown this is a critical step to closing the gap between children and adults. Realistically, if we can't end AIDS in children, what chance do we have of reaching 2035? In fact, AIDS in children can be ended in Kenya and on the continent, and with the improved tools and knowledge we now have in hand. We're at a moment where the question really is, will we collectively choose and act to do so? Elizabeth Glaser once said, sometimes point of attack for children, mothers, and families everywhere, driving tangible change on the technical approaches, the political will, community strategies, and resources needed to get the job done. You have my very best wishes for a most productive conference and exciting actions outlook. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, moderator. Yeah, chief guest, CAS Mwangangi, Madam Siparo, the board chair, Dr. Catherine Ngugi, head of NASCOP, our young people representative, Ruth, PEPFAR representative, Max, the conference chair, Professor Nguri, NAC leadership, government representatives, conference participants. Thank you so much once again. Yeah, let me start by congratulating the government, especially NAC, for organizing this important conference and bringing us together to review how have we done in terms of the AIDS response, and now review, learn, and innovate, because the key word for today's conference is innovation and resilience. So it's very important to highlight what we want to innovate in terms of the policy, strategy, but also the implementation, so that Kenya can accelerate its response and end the AIDS and inequalities. Thank you, Dr. Rudy, for elaborating the global AIDS strategy. You know, yeah, we speak the same language. We are one UN family. but not only as UN, all of us are speaking the same language. So we have the high-level meeting, political declaration, which I won't go into details because I have my regional director online to represent our executive director, Ms. Winnie Bianyima, to deliver her statement. But taking this opportunity again, I want to congratulate Kenya, especially for allocating resources now for HIV, TB, and malaria for the first time. And we hope this domestic financing as part of the innovation will continue and grow until it is fully owned by the government and the nation. So with this brief introduction, I have Mr. Enes Chuma, our regional director for Eastern and Southern Africa, online to deliver our executive director's remark. And thank you very much for the opportunity. So I pass on the floor to him. Thank you.
For the feed.
Yes. Can you confirm that you can hear me? Because I can hear you. Hello?
We can hear you very clear.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me acknowledge the Chief Guest, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, Chief Administrative Secretary, Minister of Health. And also, if you agree with me, I'll just make the observation that all protocols observed in the interest of saving time. As mentioned by Nadine, my name is Enes Chuma, and I am the Regional Director for UNAIDS, and I'm going to make a statement on behalf of Dr. Winnie Bianyima, who was invited but is not able to join at this point. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you today on this very important and timely conference. I think some of you may be aware that just over a week ago, we commemorated a somber anniversary, 40 years since the first reported cases of AIDS. Since the start of the epidemic, more than 77 million people have become infected with HIV, and almost 35 million have died. We are at a critical moment in the AIDS response, and this Maisha conference, focusing on the last mile, resilience, and innovation, is particularly timely. Last week, United Nations member states came together at the UN General Assembly and adopted a new political declaration on HIV. We're grateful for Kenya's active participation in the high-level meeting events, from the statement of Dr. Aman in the general debate on behalf of President Kenyatta, to strong Kenyan participation in the side events on faith, on young people, and on sexuality. The new political declaration is a roadmap for the next 5 years, a globally agreed plan to end AIDS by 2030. It is ambitious and, most importantly, achievable. It includes targets to achieve by 2025, prepared by UNAIDS and drawn from the Global AIDS Strategy. The golden thread through the new strategy and the political declaration is ending inequalities. The targets are inclusive, they are progressive, and will save lives if all countries reach their targets. New infections will be reduced by 75%. The number of people dying from AIDS-related illnesses will be reduced by around 65%. If countries continue business as usual, however, we will fail. The programs that have secured substantial progress will not enable us to finish the journey because the road is blocked. The evidence analysis is clear. Inequalities are driving the HIV pandemic. The very people most affected by HIV, men who have sex with men, sex workers, people who inject drugs, transgender people, and people in prisons are being left out of health programming and vulnerable to HIV. The political declaration includes important targets and commitments to break down these barriers and reach 95% of people most affected with HIV prevention and treatment services. There are also important commitments for women and girls. In sub-Saharan Africa, around 4,200 young women and adolescent girls aged between 15 and 24 are infected every week. And 6 out of 7 new infections, HIV infections among adolescents aged between the ages of 15 and 19 are among adolescent girls. We need to ensure that all girls complete secondary education and are empowered with a full set of services and rights. Member states have also committed to increase and fully fund the AIDS response, investing $29 billion annually by 2025 in low and income countries will save lives. As Kenya moves into middle income status, we also need to find ways of increasing domestic financing for the HIV response to ensure sustainability. I applaud the government for allocating 47.7 billion shillings from its 2021-2022 annual budget for UHC that includes 5.8 billion for addressing cases of HIV, TB, and malaria. I applaud Kenya's AIDS strategic framework, which incorporates the latest targets. UNAIDS looks forward to working with you and your civil society partners as we implement the political declaration. We must work hand in glove with our friends and allies in communities. Community-led and community-owned approaches are absolutely key to address intersecting inequalities and bring us closer to our goals. The inequalities exposed by the colliding pandemics of HIV and COVID-19 are indeed a wake-up call for the world to prioritize and fully invest in realizing the right to health for all people. And I commend the efforts of the Kenyan government to continue to not drop the urgent fight on HIV while fighting COVID. Thank you for your steadfast leadership on rolling out universal health care as well. In closing, I wish you successful deliberations over the next few days. Together, we can end the inequalities that fuel new HIV infections and that keep people away from health services. At UNAIDS, we will look forward to working with you very closely and to the outcomes of this conference. Let's keep the fight on. I thank you for your attention.
We are almost there, so don't tire. At this moment, allow me to introduce Dr. Daniel, County Director, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. Represented here by Maxwell Marks, Senior Advisor and External Relations, who are going to make his remarks and thereafter invite Dr. Towns.
Happy Monday. You don't all sound happy. CAS, Ministry of Health, Dr. Gangi,
tonight.
I had everything prepared. If I hadn't met Chi Shang, I'd have my doctorate by now.
You've really thought this through?
I've made up my mind already. We'll hit the road after Xiaotian has recovered, probably in a few days. Nobody can stop me, even Taylor.
You tell Chi Shang I'm not that cheap. The issue between us can't be resolved by a bank card. From now on, we're nothing but strangers.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
You're going to realize it soon, Dad, just how mistaken you are. And you and Maximiliano are going to remember me, Dad. You're going to remember me. Listen, don't be naive. Come on. Amaya will obviously be there because that's the wedding of her sister. But my brother doesn't have any business there. He went so he could be with my wife. Do you understand?
Cesar,
idiot.
No! But none of you knows what I'm capable of doing in the name of justice.
Right. And what justice are you talking about, huh? Answer me! Answer me!
Max, watch out! Be careful!
Next on.
Hello.
Hamjambo.
Nzuri sana. Kidogo park your own risk please. Watoka wapi? Jirani yako mimi nakaa hapa Phase 2 hapa.
Wewe unasema waka mashambani.
Mimi naishi hapa karibu hapo Phase 2. Hatoke ndani yayo na kusikia. Hata gari zangu zoshwa pale pale. Karibu hapa gari 4. Mwanangu mimi kazi yangu ni Kanda Warriors. Kanda Warriors. Wale Red Indian.
Next on.
They're just killing us, killing us, killing us. Because of the color of our skin. They're just killing us, killing us.
And I just make the perfect melodies. Kisses, kisses, kisses.
Very spiritual, say man a real Rasta man. Rasta rude boy. This man a rebel.
Go give in, Rastafari. Money is him and his schism. Babylon don't got no flow on them now.
True love, and it feels like freedom at last.
He looks cool, calm and collected as he inspects the works are being done on his car in readiness for his debut in the WRC Safari Rally, a demeanor that personifies what is required of a competitor in these adrenaline motorsports.
It's taken a lot of training for us to even come close to that. And we started by fragmenting the team so that different people deal with different things, so that the guys who are driving are dealing with being in the car and we don't care about anything else. So they won't ask us what to repair and replace in the car, all in an effort to keep our heads lighter. You want to be focused. You want to shut out all other problems in the world, because once you're done with the rally, you'll still find them. So that takes time to learn. It's not something I can tell you there's a process to doing, but there's a lot of calmness and meditation that you need to do days before the rally to just learn how to control your body. Think about it this way. You have adrenaline that's pumping in your body, that's pushing you to do crazy things. And at the same time, you have your mind that needs to control how your body behaves and how you process all this stuff. So you need to calm yourself down while still adrenaline is in the background, riling things up. So it's not easy. It's something that I've had to learn over time. But now I almost can switch it on and off, depending on what situation we need.
Evans Akavese is one of the fastest rising indigenous Kenyans who have come a long way in rally to make their presence felt. He was inspired by both local and international top drivers to take up the sport.
But I remember Ian's win in 1994, I believe, with the Celica. That Celica is probably what now made me cement it. Yeah, I'm doing this thing. Yeah, they did a remote service, and it so happened that remote service was near where I was. The car was stopped just almost where I was. So you can imagine a car just in front of you here, and as a young boy, guys are rushing around with spanners, fungua, check this, do this. Driver anajimwagilia maji. I'm like, this is it. There's nothing else to be doing other than this. So since then, we've been trying to recreate that, even as we want that. So if years later I can be doing a small part of that, dream come true. Dream come true, to be honest.
And thanks to the able hands of Mzee Wakazi, he quickly learned the ropes of the game.
I had the ambition since I was young, and it's possibly the only ambition that actually stuck. So everything else seemed to be a means to an end for me to make sure that I rally. So eventually I had to enter motorsport. I started by doing volunteering in different workshops with various lead drivers. My longest stint being at Azano is actually the one who even connected me to Absalom, my navigator. He's the one who connected me to my team manager. These are guys we trained with back in the day. So our friendship just grew out of all of that, and it was easy to just transition into a team.
He remembers his first experience as if it was yesterday and how scary it was.
My first experience driving a rally car was actually in an event, that is. It was 2018 Safari Rally. One of the best events, if you ask me, because just starting was a complication on its own. We had so many problems in that rally. We didn't finish. And we had, honestly, all sorts of problems. In fact, I guess that's where I actually started learning about all these things that I'd been taught by Azza and the rest on elements of preparation of the car, elements of preparation of the team, mentally accepting what you're going to do and preparing yourself for it. So that event actually was because we had actually talked about it for a while with Absalom. He had, the weekend before, they had an accident in, I think, a Tanga rally or Arusha rally. It actually ended up with I think 2 spectators passing away. So he was also extremely scared. So for me, it worked very well that we were actually scared. So we were very, very, very scared. So the first stage, we didn't do anything major. The second stage, nothing also. But by the time adrenaline is now checking in to tell you it's not that bad. It was the third stage, and that's actually the stage we went out. So one of the best experiences I can put together. That I will never forget that first rally.
Evans overcame his fears to enter into competition proper and hone his motorsports skills.
We had to figure out how to sort out the car, because then that became our next problem. How do we make it reliable enough to finish events? So that was I think it took us the next 2 rallies to actually complete an event. And the first one I finished was KMC Rally, somewhere in Lisa Farm. I was dead last. I'd hit an antelope, I think, as in all sorts of problems I had. By the time I got to the finish line, the car had cooked the engine completely. That's how much overheating we had done. It could only manage to do that small round to take us to receive the trophy. After that, engine dead. But that was my first event to finish. So from then we started putting in systems to actually make sure that the rally car is prepared early enough, and so on and so forth.
He discovered along the way he had to switch to more reliable models for better performance.
So from there we changed the car, because then we realized whatever we were doing to that old one, we were throwing money at it and it was not solving any issue. So we actually now changed the car at that point, which is where we built now the GF8. But we wanted a similar platform to what we originally had, so that we're not changing parts and things are not too crazy for us to figure out. And the car itself became reliable, so we started finishing well. Then we needed a lot more power. That's when we now got the N10. The N10 again was a properly built rally car, compared to the one that we had done for ourselves. The GC8 lacked in a lot of things. Your engine mapping, the things that give you extra advantage. So buying a car that had already been done to all that made a lot more sense for us.
And it paid off, although it forced him to start from the scratch.
It's never missed a beat, to be honest. It's been one of my best experiences. The best results we've gotten so far is with this car, with the N10, so it's just like a spot in my heart. It's the same one we did Arusha with, who were 5th overall. Incidentally, in the first year that we had it, which was actually last year, the lowest we ever got was 7th overall. And in the championship, I think we finished 4th, but then it was cancelled towards the end. Yeah, but it's been a brilliant ride, the N10. But now this year, because of the safari and the upgrades we wanted to do to the car, it was easier and almost cheaper for us to do it on a different platform. So that's why we actually shifted from the Subaru to now the Evo 10.
COVID-19 struck, and with it came some new challenges, but it didn't throw them off the course despite some ups and downs.
We had, when we just got the car, the N10, because I was just in January 2020, we did a lot of testing. We did a lot of testing in different farms. And the original tests we used to do were short events and things of that nature, but soon enough we came to realize that the car is very different from what we were used to. So we needed to put in a lot more mileage in training. So we changed the training mechanisms, and whatever we used to call now training had to essentially be redefined. We joined hand with a few teams who are already doing that kind of thing, so it was easier for us to just piggyback on whatever they were doing and get us also to achieve something good enough, which is now this Menengai Lemon team, Eric Bengi's team. So we've been associating for quite a while and developed us quite a bit, especially with this car. So by the time it came to the first event we did with it was 7th overall. That was a Guru Nanak. Then the next event we did with it was a Nyaururu. That was an Nakuru rally, 7th again. And that is where now COVID struck. And at that point, we're actually looking at being consistent for the whole year and try and get as much as possible from this car, because we were waiting for Safari 2020. It was supposed to be the big event, was supposed to actually be in 2020. Well, when everything was stopped, it also took us back. We actually didn't know what to do, because now you have time and that's all you have. So you can only reminisce. So we actually started making our trainings bigger and longer in that time. So we trained more. We rebuilt the car from scratch, just to give it that personal touch, so that you're also comfortable, that you know everything that's happening in that car and you're confident with it in an event. So you can imagine that many months between the last event we did, I think was in beginning of March or something. The next event we did with it, proper competition, was in November. So when TZ guys announced that there'll be a rally and they're welcoming foreigners, we jumped on that wagon like we were on steroids. It's not even funny. It was not even a team discussion. It was just an SMS. I'm guessing next week we are on. Yes. So all of us went to TZ. It was a very nice event because we had been training so much with the car. So we also wanted to see how we are as a team in proper competition setup. And our prayers were answered. We were 5th on that event. We would have done better, but no complaints. 5th was brilliant.
When the Equator Rally was reinstated in the IRC to act as a curtain raiser for the WRC Safari Rally, Evans could not bypass the opportunity to test his new car, and it was quite an experience, a story in its own to say the least.
A long event brings in some extra challenges. think about fuel, your tire selection, how your crew is handled, because you also don't want them fatigued before the event ends. So if you put all those things together, it's actually it's a very technical rally. So the normal approach would be a cautious approach, which is what we tried having, but our mojo was destroyed day one on practice. Because again, with the new car, which we had just bought and done quite a bit of testing on it. We had never really opened the car or anything, but because it had sat for a while, it had not competed for I think 2 years, a year or 2 years or something like that. So some of the problems came up on the day of the rally, the first day of the rally. And in all these times when we were doing testing, everything was fine. All the problems that came up, we sorted. And those we were confident that was the only problem. So with the gearbox was the first thing for us to actually have a problem with. No, actually the clutch before we left. And before that, we had rolled the car on one of the sections when we were doing training. Because we used to have 100-kilometer training sessions broken down to stages. So in one of the areas where the attitude I had was still of the Subaru, not of the new car, and I needed to change a few settings myself, and all that stuff had escaped us. So we actually went wide on a corner and rolled the car, and that was a week to ARC, 1 week. So we rebuilt the car. But as a result, I think while loading it, when it had rolled, when they were offloading it or loading it onto the trailer, they had burnt the clutch, because the clutches on these things are quite sensitive. So we didn't know that until a day to the rally. A day to the rally, when we were leaving the workshop, I drove the car and felt, the clutch, nothing. So they fixed, we put in a new clutch. Then they sent it for scrutineering, and everything was okay at that point. The day we start qualifying, the proper rally stage, from just the get-go, we could tell we have other problems now. We were not sure of the extent, but we just drove. We didn't even push it, that qualifying stage, which is what was determining the starting times for the following day. We didn't push it because we were not confident with it. The fuel pumps had failed. Yeah, well, one fuel pump had failed, and when you were connecting to the other one, the cable, whatever you attached to the fuel pump, on the second fuel pump, broke. So now we don't have proper fuel supply. The gearbox is trying to mess with us, and at that point, I was not sure it was a gearbox. But by the time we drove from that qualifying stage all the way back to service, it actually packed up. A bolt went through the gearbox, sheared it, so we had all the oil leaking, and the gearbox jammed. The thing couldn't move. We decided now to try and see if we can repair. But by the time we removed it, we were very sure there's no repairs in sight, because it's a housing that was properly destroyed, not even the gearbox itself, not the mechanism. So we were either to continue with the rally or look for a new gearbox. No one within that vicinity had one that we could get. So we had to send people to Nairobi to look for one, which we got, and got it back there, I think, by 10:30. I came back to Nakuru. Now, because the rally had not properly started, they allowed us to repair the car and re-scrutineer the following day in the morning. So my big shot team here did all they could and made sure that car worked. So by 6, we were on the start line with everyone else. We had changed the gearbox from a competition one to a standard one, just to make sure we finish the rally, which, mind you, till now, it's not started. So after that, when we got into a rhythm, because of the matope and all that, and because the car had rolled, we had one of the pipes that connects to, you throw your water on your windscreen. Like this much section of a pipe was missing. Someone didn't replace it. But then we didn't notice it, because when the car is being cleaned and all these things, you would normally be wiping it. We don't use the wipers. So when you're in the field, when you need the wipers, unafinya maji haikuji, and you have matope on the windscreen kabisa, and you're supposed to be competing. So you can't even afford to slow down and look at what the problem is, because you don't even know if you can sort it in the first place. So You had, because you have drinking water in the car, at some point when you find a nice patch, kazi yangu ni kumwaga maji kwa windscreen, then now, we can see something. Hopefully you don't get any more mud, which you do, because it was raining. So that first day was a lot of drama for us. And again, it's because we had not, as a team, we had not, built the car. So we are not comfortable yet with it. By the second loop, we had sorted all those first issues of the day. Second loop, a new problem crept up. I think because the car had sat for a while, it was not driven for competition for over a year. One of the coils had just started degenerating, one of the ignition coils. So in the second loop, it died. So we had now almost no power. It sounds so bad at the back. We couldn't almost hear ourselves, and we are wearing helmets with intercoms. So at some point, my navigator had to be extremely illustrative, because from where I'm seated, I cannot turn and look at him. I actually can't. There are restrictions on all those things we wear. So I can only see this much. So he has to throw his hand somewhere near the screen, in front of me. Tell me it's right 4. Point at which side that corner should be coming so that I also don't slow down. Because again, if you slow down, the car won't pick up speed. So out of the nightmare of a section, at that point, honestly, we contemplated just getting to service and calling it quits, because now we are not competing. If you look at our times on the first stage, we were 11th. We posted 11th, the 11th fastest time, with I think 39 entries. Yeah. On the second stage, we were 7th. If you look in the afternoon, it's the opposite. We're almost 20, 22. So really, what are you doing? When we got back to service, because so many people got out by the end of the day, we were actually 8th, because the total number of people remaining in the event were 13. So I'm like, okay, that's not bad. Why not do this again tomorrow? It's not a good addiction, I'll tell you that. So we repaired all we could. Next day in the morning, second day, the power issues that we had actually started creeping up more. Not that now the ignition coils, everything had been sorted, but we had a loss of power because I suspected the ACD pump. There's something that controls how the vehicle would handle. That thing had ceased. It was not working anymore. So even when you have muddy tracks, you don't have full grip, because that is not providing you, sending power to where it's supposed to be going. So we just did a ride through the first 2 stages, because at that point we're looking at just finishing the event. Just put that experience in the bag, then let's talk about this another day. By the second loop, it was a bit dry, and we're willing now to commit a bit more, because it's proper gravel. We don't need that much ACD. We can actually throw the car around and make it work. It was okay, but well, in this one stage, Kedong, towards I think the last 6 to 8 kilometers, I've gone in to step on the brakes, and the brake pedal goes all the way to the other side. No change. So a navigator starts screaming at me because he realizes what we are doing and the corner that's coming up. And at that point, I don't know how to tell this guy without upsetting him that this thing has no brakes. So I just drove, and then he starts wondering, what are we doing? Why are we trying to brake the car? Let's just finish the event. So by the end of that stage, I start trying to demonstrate to him how the car cannot stop, because you have to drive competitively generally. If the corner grading is not too bad, it allows you to maintain a relatively fast speed. And that is what I was banking on, knowing how Kedong was. So I didn't let off per se. But towards the end, where you actually need to stop, it didn't stop. Just went all the way past the time control, and we incurred even penalties because of that. But it was a fun experience at that point. We drove it back to service, where they sorted out. It was a small pipe that the rear left, a small pipe that had cut, and now all the oil had leaked through that, so you have zero brakes. So that was repaired. In the second loop, because now it's a lot drier, we know we have brakes, we can commit. That stage we actually found, there's a guy who took a jump that was, I don't know what the grading was, but it was a little off. So the car landed in such a bad way that the front left tire, that plus the suspension, went out of the car. So it blocked the entire road, and it was a small road. So when you got there, we really couldn't do anything. So there's something in rally we call red flags. So a red flag was issued to us, which means all the guys who are affected by that and backwards, you cannot compete. You're given, let's call it a dummy time. But now, because that stage had been done in the morning, they took 30 seconds off that time of the stage in the morning. Remember, in the morning it was muddy, so we did zero work. Our ACD pump was not working, so we were actually almost bottom on that stage. Then you only took 30 seconds. Well, when it's dry, we could have easily done half the time we did in the morning. So at that point again, we started contemplating, this rally really doesn't want us to finish. So, so why not just go home? So, but luckily we only had one stage remaining, and that one last stage took all the strength we had, to be honest, to actually do it. We were ready to go. We did it and just finished. In fact, we didn't even post any decent times. We didn't even bother looking at the times. Whatever they were going to tell us, even if they said we were dead last, we'd be okay with that. Just say we finished. There's a trophy to all this madness, and we go home. So when you got to the finish, then you actually realized, 13th is not too bad. In the GCA, it used to be worse. So you're giving yourself some consolations. But all in all, a crazy, crazy experience. What we learned from it all, though, it's one, we need to own the car, prepare it ourselves, sort out the problems that we know, first of all. But in doing that, take down everything else, build it afresh, so that we are in control of what we are saying, this we've done, or this we've not done, and we know it can hold for the next event or two, that kind of thing.
Is now put behind his tribulations to focus on the big picture, where he'll rely on the experience of his navigator Absalom Oswani to make sure they come out unscathed.
At least I knew him from a long time back. I wanted someone more experienced than myself, because then it would be easier for me only to be learning, not the both of us. Luckily enough for him, he has done all sorts of things, some quite unnecessary, but we won't get to that today. He's still my friend, we have to understand each other. He has to understand how I behave, I have to understand how he behaves, to know when he's off his meds, if I can put it like that, or when he's actually off pace with me. He has to figure out how to push me in sections where I'm taking it a bit too cautious without telling me, go. You have to figure out what makes this guy tick. And that takes time. And that's why you will see most setups remain the same. Driver, navigator don't change as much, because there's that chemistry that it has to work, it has to gel. It's been a crazy ride with him, I'll be honest with you. But he's a good lad. I think his background, he comes more from a teaching background than anything else. So it's easier for him to show the rest the ropes. And having been experienced on so many other teams, even for our greater team, it is very easy for him to just tell people, instead of doing this, I've seen this being done in a different way. It makes the process of learning and improvement a lot easier and a lot faster. Yeah, but it doesn't come without its challenges. It doesn't. Because of adrenaline, and we are two of us in that car, he makes a small mistake, or I make a small mistake, and could have a nice fight. It's only that we are timed. That's the only reason probably I think we don't fight. And then by the time you get to the end of the stage, you're so happy to have finished the stage, you don't remember what this guy did to you. But it's working. Let me put it like that. It's working. He started with us when we had zero experience as a team, because all of us who are together were green in rally, if you can put it like that. We had various experiences under different teams, But when you bring people together, they have to work for a bit before they become a cohesive unit.
Apart from Aswani, has quite a young and formidable Green Lifer team working behind the scenes to ensure they make the dreams come true in the Safari Rally.
Our team is a young one, relatively, in the sport, but we are trying to move mountains. We expect the best from ourselves, and people should do. We push ourselves to do the best that is possible in terms of achievement in the sport. Otherwise, it would be pointless to be, putting this much effort without improving. We are doing a lot of analysis internally to actually make sure that everything we are building is an improvement. We are not repeating yesterday's mistakes. The team itself comprises of a whole section of media guys and a whole section of service crew. Service crew is led by James Onyango, and he has his own team of 6 people to guide through the mechanisms of what they need to do. The media team has its own leader, again, Bill Widad. He does his own setups. So we expect quite a bit of scrutiny internally and externally. We'd like to get as much viewership as is possible. I'll be frank about that. And historically, only the top teams have been receiving that kind of, eyes on their back, if you can put it like that. These types of events are made possible by corporates who are coming together and putting money on a team or two, to make sure that they actually put their name out there. So it is very important that we, one, perform, two, that we be seen to perform. Because without that element of people seeing us, then we lose our credibility to the people who have put us in these positions. Because everything is expected to come back with a positive. The same way we expect to go out coming from a losing situation, we expect to do the best, possibly win, right? It's the same way they expect us to do great things with the little they've given us in terms of resource. Mentally, you're ready, but you always have small doubts. In terms of preparation, because we had made a decision to rebuild the car, that I am already comfortable with, because I know my team's capability. They will take care of that side. So for me and the navigator, our job is to keep focus, because this is a very tricky event. It's not, it is a sprint, yes, but it is a very technical sprint. Zabu was calling it a navigator's event. That if I actually miss anything he says, that could be the end of the rally. Something major will happen. So that's how to look at it. It's very technical, and at the same time you need to be extremely fast. So you need to think about nothing else around that time. So we are preparing ourselves through your regimes of physical exercise, of mental, meditation, that to just allow you to control your body a lot more. Secondly, the team is preparing on the car side by building everything afresh, making sure everything is in spick and span condition. Anything that could break down, you'd rather have it replaced now and than during the event. Your clutches, small things like your steering, rack ends and stuff like that. You'd be amazed what happens to these cars when they see a little bit of a stone. Rally tire selections, the rims that you're going to put on, the smallest and silliest of things have the biggest impact in a rally. So the team manager is in charge of that whole section of rebuilding the car, and I'm sure every other team is going through the similar regime of take down everything, put brand new things inside, or whatever is working, make sure it actually works really well so that you don't get silly failures. The remaining bit is now family, because we also have to put our family's issues in order, because you can't be in an event na pigiwe simu ya umekatiwa maji.
Evans KBC, who currently leads the Division 2, navigated by Absalom Eswani, make quite a team in his Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 10, and they are determined to stand out and be counted among the finishers when it's all done and dusted.
You grow up wanting something so bad that you don't know what to do when it actually comes. That's where we are. So most of these guys have seen it. You've experienced it through the world of, WRC Plus, and their media outlets. You've seen it all and you think you know how it works. But being in it is a different ballgame altogether. I can't explain, unfortunately. It's one of the best things. It's the only thing I've been looking forward to this year, that intently. So you can imagine the amount of time we are putting into the preparation with that kind of attitude. It's bigger than, in my opinion, it's bigger than you can imagine what it means to us. Having, wanted it for so long, from when you were 4 years or something like that, to now that you actually could be a part of it, and now you are actually a part of it. It's
Tonight.
I had everything prepared. If I hadn't met Chida-san, I'd have my doctorate by now.
You really thought this through?
I've made up my mind already. We'll hit the road after Shetin has recovered, probably in a few days. Nobody can stop me, even Taylor.
You tell Chida-san I'm not that cheap. The issue between us can't be resolved by a bank card. From now on, we're nothing but strangers.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
You're going to realize it soon, Dad, just how mistaken you are. And you and Maximiliano are going to remember me, Dad. You're going to remember me. Listen, don't be naive. Come on. Amaya will obviously be there because that's the wedding of her sister. But my brother doesn't have any business there. He went so he could be with my wife. Do you understand?
Cesar,
idiot.
No! But none of you knows what I'm capable of doing in the name of justice.
Right. And what justice are you talking about, huh? Answer me. Answer me.
Max, watch out! Be careful!
Next on.
Hello.
Hamjambo.
Nzuri sana. Kidogo park your own risk please. Watoka wapi? Jirani yako mimi nakaa hapa hapa.
Wewe unasema waka mashambani.
Mimi naishi hapa karibu phase 2. Hatoke ndani yayo na kusikia. Hata gari zangu zoshwa pale pale. Karibu hapa gari 4. Mwanangu mimi kazi yangu ni Kanda Warriors. Kanda Warriors. Wale Red Indian.
Next on.
They're just killing us, killing us, killing us. Because of the color of our skin. They're just killing us, killing us.
You and I just make the perfect melodies. Kisses, kisses, kisses.
Very spiritual, say man a real Rasta man. Rasta rude boy. This man a rebel.
Go give in, Rastafari. But the easy man is kiss him. Babylon don't got no flow on them now.
True love, and it feels like freedom at
Kumchukulia kwa mfano ndani ya matatu.
Yaani mtu mzima na miaka zake hizo miaka zote. Mtu ajui kujua kuandika note. Note tu peke yake. Kusoma kweli itasaidia.
Nini nakusumbua na nini?
Nauliza. You bwana?
There. Okay.
Mama Angel.
Haya, kwani ni vita? Nini wewe? Yaani wataka kumpiga? Huwezi mpika mpike nini?
It's always great to get back into rally car, and at the moment, to be quite honest, I'm rallying at a different level.
Obviously, Aslam himself is enthusiastic and dynamic. He knows what he wants.
I always wanted to be a pilot, right from my childhood. There have been many times, when I had to put in a lot of work to make it work. But also, it's a question of being at the right place at the right time. As far as the aviation business is concerned, yes, it's been tough. There have been many times, when I had to put in a lot of work to make it work. But also, it's a question of being at the right place at the right time.
It is dawn here in Nairobi today, and hundreds of thousands of the city's inhabitants are on the move. This is Kenya's capital, the hub of East and Central Africa, a magnet since its early days for those seeking opportunities and a better life. But it is also a city of contrast, where the haves and have-nots rush past each other every day. In Loresho, a leafy suburb of Nairobi and home of Mohammed Aslam Khan, this aviator, rally driver and entrepreneur is beginning his day.
Most people are asleep at this time. All right, thanks a lot. Yes, okay, bye. Morning, Solomon. How are you? Sir. Everything okay?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. One of the biggest advantages of living in Kenya is I think we got beautiful properties and we have a lot of greenery around. This is, greenery like this you won't find in places like London and Geneva and the rest. There's a big gap between those who have and those who haven't. And you find this, wherever there's a good residential area, you'll find slums close to it.
Aslam Khan clearly belongs to one of Nairobi's so-called haves. Add to this the allure of fast cars and jets, and this somewhat unassuming man would appear to have a larger-than-life story. But in many ways, his story is like that of Nairobi's, and like those who over the years have come, made their home here, and strive to achieve success in this competitive melting pot. At the turn of the last century, thousands of migrants from the Indian subcontinent came to settle on the east coast of Africa. Many were brought by the British as coolies to build the railway from Mombasa to Kampala, a venture the tabloids dubbed the Lunatic Line because of the cost and sheer scale of the project. Others, like Aslam's grandfather, got jobs associated with the railway or set up shop on various stages en route. The railway cost thousands of lives.
My grandfather came here with the railway police, and then he worked in Kenya for some time, and then went back to India, then it was, and got married and came back when my father was born in Mombasa.
Before embarking on the steep climb up the highlands of the Rift Valley, a depot was set up at a place the Maasai called Ewaso Nyaiberi, meaning place of cool waters.